I'm Keith Kreisher, the Executive Director of the IoT M2M Council, or IMC, and I welcome you to the IMC's conference program being recorded here on the CES 22 show floor in Las Vegas. The IMC is the exclusive IoT partner for CES, so we're doing conference programming, press events, networking events, and of course, organizing our IoT infrastructure pavilion. I think we can all agree that CES 22 is not the show we wanted, but the pavilion looks great, and I can say with some confidence that the IoT pavilion is the busiest part of the show. I'm joined this morning by my good friend, Landon Garner, the Chief Marketing Officer of Core, to discuss telehealth. Landon, in this regard, is representing the IMC Board of Governors, so welcome, Landon.
Thanks, Keith. Happy to be here.
Before I start, if you could just give us briefly an introduction to yourself and to Core, and what is Core's role in the IoT ecosystem as it relates to telehealth?
Perfect, yeah. Core is kind of one of the pioneers, I would say, of IoT. It was here back when we called the IoT M2M Council M2M, and that term was more broadly used. But it's been through all kinds of different things, from sunsets to transformations to managed services now that we provide. We're the largest independent IoT connectivity provider in the world. We serve just over 3,600 customers around the world in about 192 countries. So pretty much anywhere you go in the world, you'll find Core. Healthcare happens to be our largest vertical. We made an acquisition about 2 years ago of a company called Integron. I was a part of that team, and then
I remember, and
came to Core through that acquisition. But we serve a lot of the remote patient monitoring, medical device, clinical research organizations around the world, and we do that because we have quite a set of capabilities around forward reverse logistics, software configuration, in addition to the connectivity and general managed services we provide, all within kind of an FDA compliant, ISO 13485 compliant facility. So it gives us kind of a unique selling value, I guess, to the healthcare space that it's kind of unprecedented, at least in the IoT world.
Terrific stuff. I'm going to start, Landon, sort of at 30,000 feet, and then we'll drill down as we go along. But to start with, just sort of talking about the healthcare market broadly and telehealth more specifically, why is healthcare digitizing? I mean, what's driving it?
Well, I mean, the last 2 years have just been, we're back finally at this show. It feels like a little momentum is coming back with people coming out of the pandemic a little bit, although still obviously some concerns around the world there. But for the last 2 years, it's really accentuated the need for remote care, whether it's people unable to leave their homes or, care isn't as accessible as it needs to be. We've seen the expedition of things like clinical research to move things like the vaccine forward at astronomical rates. All of that has really been fueled by enablement of technology. And so we say at Core, the last 2 years has probably been akin to the last 10 or 20 years of progress in terms of connected health. And finally, we have the networks, the infrastructure in place to support those types of use cases at a grander scale.
Can you talk about some of those use cases? You mentioned remote patient monitoring, clinical trials. Talk to us about those a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Clinical trials, I'll start there just because we're talking about, I mentioned the vaccine, right? We see clinical research organizations. These are organizations that go out and work with pharmaceutical sponsors like Pfizer and AstraZeneca, these types. And they play such a critical role in the effectively the review of the pharmaceutical products that are launched in the market. Historically, what happens, Keith, is a drug goes through phase 1, 2, and 3 of clinical research. Within that, at some point, they'll say, okay, this is safe enough in a stage 3 trial to give to you, Keith, or your family member or whoever, to trial. You would, in the past, go into a clinic, pick up a kit that might include a couple of biometric sensors, that it would include the pharmaceutical product. You'd go home, you'd take that, you'd write down in a journal how you feel. And then that all gets sent back through the mail, back to the CRO, and gathered, and it takes a few months to gather that data and assemble it. Of course, we didn't have time for that with a vaccine, as you know.
I was going to ask, how has the pandemic shaped all of this?
Yeah, unbelievably. It's just put fuel on that fire. So now today, you can sign up for a clinical research with a clinical research organization for a trial. You'll go to the clinic still, or maybe it'll even be mailed to you, but you'll open that box, and there might be a couple Bluetooth biometric peripheral devices in there. You'll open it up, you'll plug them in, you'll power them on. They're already paired to a device that's able to gather your biometric data and send it back directly to that CRO. You'll take your, whatever treatment you might be taking. You'll hop on a little tablet that's connected already through a cellular network. You'll say, hey, I feel great today. I took 3 of these pills. I worked out in the morning. I had a bit of a stomach ache in the evening, whatever it might be. You'll enter that. And in real time, that data gets sent back to the CRO.
Right.
So, you're taking a process that's months down to minutes in some cases, right? So moving that, the trial of that pharmaceutical product at exponentially faster rates. And so we do at Core the enablement of that whole solution. So when you show up at the clinic, Keith, you don't want to have to sit there and understand, do I pair this peripheral to this hub or this gateway, and how is that connected to the internet? We do all that on behalf of those customers, and it's been something that's grown, like I say, at tremendously fast rates for us.
Right. You're talking about decentralized clinical trials. What about remote patient monitoring? What are some of the benefits there?
Yeah, I mean, again, huge, right? So I'll walk you through just a really interesting use case, right? We had a company, actually Dexcom, if you've heard of Dexcom. They're quite an innovator when it comes to diabetes monitoring. What they were finding is patients were coming into the hospital, right, with symptoms of COVID. They happen to be on dialysis or have a diabetes condition. And what we were able to do is work with Dexcom quickly to connect their products so that data that might be read by a nurse in a care facility, that data was transmitted, effectively over a network, a cellular network, back to their care provider to say, no, Keith, stay home, you're okay. Or we already have your insulin readings that we needed every hour, right? So I don't need to go and put my personal protective equipment on, walk into the room if you have COVID, and throw that away in a second in a world where that at the time was pretty scarce. So to your question, I guess, Keith, what it does is it allows those interactions, those engagements, those measurements to take place remotely in real time, and we're able to serve more people in the end, right? And in real time. So now that person with a heart condition, right, that might have a pacemaker, we enable the technology that sends that telemetry data back to a care provider. You don't need to go into the hospital. You don't need to go see your physician. You can pick up the phone. You can take a reading with a sensor on your finger in some cases, and get the type of enlightenment that you'd want from a physician.
Terrific. What are some of the difficulties in bringing solutions to the market in the healthcare sector in terms of managed services, regulations? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big one, right? It's easy to talk about healthcare. It's pretty hard to do healthcare, right? Connected health. As soon as you start to take that product out of the package and touch it or put software on it, you're starting to get into all kinds of restrictions from data privacy, HIPAA, FDA compliance. As soon as you start to manipulate that medical device, it might have to be reclassified in a different category of medical device. So all of those things become pretty complicated, and especially once you enter into a connected world where you're modifying or outfitting these products with cellular connectivity, Bluetooth connectivity, whatever it might be. So we work, Keith, with some innovative partners out there that allow us to effectively kit, stage, provision, configure these devices. And we go through some heavy, expensive as well, audits to make sure that we're compliant within this ISO process. And for healthcare, typically it's referred to as ISO 13485 as a specific level of compliance. Right. And so we take pretty grand measures to make sure that we're compliant within that. And then from an FDA standpoint as well, we become FDA compliant. But Keith, I guess the thing is you have to realize that it's not like typical IoT devices where you take it out of the box, you configure it, you put it back in the box, and you give it to the customer. These have to be handled with a different level of care, I guess.
Right, no doubt. Talking about CROs? I know I'm jumping around a little bit on you, Landon.
Yeah, fine.
But what are some of the challenges that CROs, the people that are actually doing decentralized clinical trials, what are some of the challenges they're facing?
Yeah, I mean, historically, one of the biggest challenges they've faced, Keith, is recruitment, to be honest with you.
Wow.
So think about this, right? When you have a drug that's getting ready to be launched or being trialed, getting the right type of demographic or a broad enough, diverse enough population that can take that at scale is extremely difficult. So if you're limited as a CRO to saying, hey, here we are in Las Vegas, let's sit here at a clinic in Las Vegas and let's recruit people within 25 miles of Las Vegas to participate in that clinical trial, our demographics are going to be quite skewed in some cases, right? Whether that's by age, gender, race, whatever it might be, we don't get a very good picture as a CRO of what outcomes might come out of treatment with that drug.
Wow.
What decentralized trials do is it effectively takes that clinic and it virtualizes it. Now you have access to Wichita, you have access to Sacramento, you have access to Dallas, Texas, all within effectively the same footprint.
Right.
So recruitment becomes much, I won't say easier, but much more accessible, right?
Right.
And that's probably the biggest challenge that CROs face today.
And what role does connectivity play in that specifically? I mean, where does the connectivity technology come in?
Yeah, so I mean, going back to that same example, right? In the past, you would come in, you drop off your journal or you drop off your whatever method of data capture you have back to the clinic here in Las Vegas, as an example. You have now a patient that's taking this medication in Wichita. They're not going to obviously be able to come back to Las Vegas very easily, right? It just doesn't make sense. Obviously, connectivity connects that dot. So now again, that participant in a clinical study that's on the other side of the country or in another country altogether, that data gets sent in real time back to that clinician and gets analyzed in real time again, taking off months, but also opening up the population for a more broad, diverse set of participants in a study.
Right. Security, privacy, how are they being addressed? Not just in the clinical trial.
Remote patient
but
monitoring
in
as well.
Remote patients as well.
Yeah, I mean, big concern, right? And there's obviously some pretty heavy legislation that keeps us within
HIPAA?
certain confines, or HIPAA, exactly. So, GDPR is even a part of that as well, as we take patient data, but we HIPAA obviously with the privacy that's related to that. So from our standpoint, we work with, we don't like to get into that like anybody, right? We want to stay as far away from those types of things as we can. So we typically act as the I guess, technology enablement channel. And we let our partners, the Philips of the world, right, that have these products like Health Suite digital platform that allow the data to sit and reside in those types of data centers that are HIPAA compliant, that are FDA compliant. But it's a huge concern, Keith, because again, when you go out and you do a clinical study or a remote patient monitoring program with a few thousand patients or participants, every one of those devices that's out there in people's hands is subject to their behavior and their activity. So we take measures, of course, working with the right partners, making sure that they're compliant with the right compliance restrictions out there. But we also make sure that the devices that we put out in the field are locked down with the appropriate mobile device management software.
Right.
So we partner with companies like IBM Mass 360 and SOTI and others to make sure that, hey, the restricted use of that device is within these walls. So, you don't get, this participant 561's son on Netflix or sending data from a phone that should just be used for one single purpose. We're able to monitor that and actively address that for our customers.
What are some of the other ways to mitigate? We talked about a range of challenges. What are some of the other ways to mitigate those challenges? What advice can you offer?
From what standpoint, I guess, Keith? Like from
the standpoint of not talking so much privacy and security right now, but perhaps accuracy or latency, or if it's important.
Yeah, I mean, It sounds pretty easy, right, to send out a connected device to somebody, have them sit there and jump on a weight scale or take their blood pressure or whatever it might be. It's another thing when that set of patients or participants is spread across 12 countries speaking 12 different languages.
Sure.
And the networks that are, they're dealing with 7 different networks across that spread. So that's a big challenge, right? When you say, hey, we want to globally deploy a remote patient monitoring solution out there in the world, well, you got to think about language, right? You got to think about network availability. You have to think about roaming and costs that are associated with that. We've had some programs that, a device that's destined for Angola, Africa, gets moved to Zimbabwe, and all of a sudden, in some cases, our customers come up with unexpected charges or difficulties that they're not ready for. So you have to be really precise in terms of localizing that technology to the needs that it has, and you have to work with a partner, I guess, that has the ability and the scale to go beyond borders, to go beyond language, beyond those limitations.
Do you have tips for finding the best solutions for the people in the healthcare industry out there? Is there things that they can do when they're sourcing technology to help themselves?
I would say, there's been some really successful remote patient monitoring, life sciences, clinical drug trial deployments out there. We've handled a lot of those ourselves at Core. We work with the major medical device companies, some of them that are just a few feet from us here at CES.
We're in the hall.
Yeah, we're right next door to them. So we've got experience. There's other companies out there that also do have experience. I would say that, Keith. That's probably the place to start. Go and find partners that have had success, that are having success in those areas. Talk to them, learn from them. Don't learn on the job with a new partner that hasn't done this before. Right. You're only going to get yourself in trouble, and trouble in healthcare that's some pretty hot water.
Sure. And a related question, but almost a philosophical one: why is long-term thinking more important in the healthcare sector than speed to market, perhaps?
Oh yeah, you're dealing with people's lives, right? It's plain and simple. So a mistake made here is frankly a mistake made in someone's life. So you can't do that, right? The applications here in the IoT space and across CES, there's some really cool stuff, right? They're just down the street here from us, or down the aisle, I guess there's an autonomous snowblower, right? Fantastic technology, really cool to see, but if that goes wrong,
not the same kind of liability issues.
yeah, maybe not. But again, if you get it wrong in healthcare, that's going to live with you for a while.
Sure.
Yep.
Where do you see connected health in a sort of 2 to 3 year time frame? What kind of trends can we watch out for?
I think it's going to become more comfortable for patients to see physicians virtually than it is to see them in person almost. Similar to how, I have got a teenage son, right, that's more comfortable texting his friends than he is talking to them, and that hurts me a little bit, right, to see that transformation happening. But I think we're going to see something similar in the healthcare space, where going to see the doctor is probably going to mean picking up a tablet and talking to your physician, right, versus going into the clinic. I think it's going to become more normal than not.
Right, and that's sort of an example of remote patient monitoring. What about clinical trials?
Yeah, decentralized trials is the way, period. The way of the world of taking a written journal and writing your experience in that journal is, difficult on so many levels. Like transcribing that and understanding the dynamic of what that person's language might be telling you. It's just so archaic, right? So clinical drug studies will never be the same. And I think, thank goodness for COVID on that front, in terms of allowing us to advance that cause faster than ever before.
If there is a silver lining.
Yeah, if there is, exactly. We're going to see drugs come to market faster. We're going to see patients treated faster. That clinical research process is going to move faster, which means more drugs, more benefits, more health to patients. Technology is the way for it, for sure, Keith.
Right. What about a longer-term perspective? Talking 10 years, where do you see this?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm smart enough to see that far out, but no doubt, I think Romo Bale, our CEO at Core, was up here yesterday talking about kind of the industrial revolution and the parallels we have to this digital revolution that we're in now. Talking about, things like coal and steam being kind of akin today to 5G and IoT, and how they accelerate the the revolution that we're in. I mean, we're just at the beginning, right? We're talking about low latency, ultra high speed networks with 5G in some cases, the millimeter wave, the femtocell technologies that are coming. Now what you see, I think, you're not going to travel to the Mayo Clinic across the country or into another country to go have surgery, right? You're going to start to have these centers of expertise where you're going to be able to be treated in your hometown, in your home state, in your home country, by world-renowned, very highly trained experts, both from a consultative standpoint, but also from, think, remote surgery and these types of things that are coming at us when the technology evolves to that point. It's exciting, like, being able to deliver care to places that are completely and have been completely underserved for years, obviously just benefits the world.
Sure.
So it's exciting.
Terrific stuff, Landon. My good friend Landon Garner, Chief Marketing Officer with Core. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll be bringing you more content from the show floor.